Hey everybody, since we are either starting a new series or reading a standalone book, I am jumping in to remind you what the rules are for this podcast. First rule is no real people stories. That means that any details from our own lives are merely anecdotal, and we are not reading any books that depict real people as their characters in any way or are based on historical events. Second rule is that we are judging everything off of how the author treats characters and what they put them through. We are not judging the accuracy of the trauma, the accuracy of any actual conditions that may be portrayed, or the authenticity of a character's reaction to that trauma or that particular condition. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The hosts are not trained professionals, and their opinions come from personal experience, not professional training. In this episode, we discuss fictional depictions of trauma and violence that may not be suitable for all listeners, so please take care of yourselves. Specific content warnings for each episode can be found in the show notes. Events in the media are discussed in approximate order of escalation. This episode contains spoilers. This week we are discussing Coraline, a book about a young girl who goes on a magical adventure to rescue herself and her parents from an uncertain fate. Hi, I'm Nicole.
And I'm Robin, and this is Books That Burn. Today we are discussing Coraline by Neil Gaiman. Alright, we have our factions. For the real world, we have Coraline's mom and dad. We have Miss Forcible, Miss Spink, and their dogs. We have the old man, also known as Mr. Bobo, and his mice. In the other world, we have the other mother and the other father. We have Miss Forcible and Miss Spink and dog Bats. We have the upstairs man, who is technically Mr. Bobo, but we don't talk about it when he's the upstairs man in the other world. And then we have the rats. And crossing between both worlds, we have Coraline and the cat. The cat does not have a name. The cat explains in detail why cats don't need names. For anyone who is listening to this after seeing the movie but has not read the book, listen to the episode. You'll be totally fine. The movie is an amazingly faithful adaptation. Just one note, YB is not a character in the book. His role in the movie is to be there for Coraline to externalize her dialogue. It's a really smart choice from the film, but he is not in the text. Alright, for our minor character spotlight, we have the ghost children and the theft of self.
So, these kids it's explicitly stated, the ghost children are what happens when the other mother is done feeding on you. They are food. Mm-hmm. Coraline is the next meal.
Yeah, and one of the children describes it as, "She will take your life and all you are and all you carest for, and she will leave you with nothing but mist and fog. She'll take your joy, and one day you'll awake, and your heart and your soul will have gone. A husk you'll be, a wisp you'll be, and a thing no more than a dream on waking or a memory of something forgotten."
Yeah. So we kind of get this, I guess the implication is that these are all kids who decided to stay with her for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. Like, she didn't shove them in the mirror and then just leave them there. Like, they decided to abandon the real world. But they're literally just, like, they're not even ghosts, necessarily. Are they? Like, they're just...
Well, they are the ghost children. Like, they don't remember their names. They have memories of parts of their life and other people, but...
I would argue that they are a memory instead of being purely a ghost, just because the thing that they don't have is their soul.
Okay,
maybe I should have been clear. This is a mythological opinion that I have.
Sure, okay. Not explicit in the text.
No, this is a Nicole has a semantics question and thinks that these are not actually ghosts because she thinks they're the memory of ghosts, because the ghost part is the soul, which is the thing that has been taken from them. So I was mostly asking if that was your read on this also.
I was thinking of soul as more of like soul in the sense of like, if someone like is really good at music, you might be like, oh, they've got like a lot of soul. I was thinking of it when they say, like, your heart and your soul will have gone.
Yeah, I think she literally plucked their soul out from them. And then...
So then you think...
I think they literally have lost this thing, like a physical object.
Oh, okay. I mean, I guess
Coraline goes and picks up physical objects.
That's true. Okay. So they are the memory. And then, because my objection to them not having souls anymore was going to be that at the end in the dream when she's talking to them, they're much more together, and so they must have their souls. But you're right. The soul literally is the thing that they're looking for. So they've got a memory and they've got a soul. She puts the two back together and then they're free.
Well, because that's why they don't remember who they are. Because...
And then they start to.
Yeah. Because she literally took who they are. So this is really... This is a stripping of identity in the most literal sense. And it's just very... Oh, man. It's very understated.
Yeah. Like, it doesn't dwell on it. It's not... I mean, it's not even as explicit as, like, most descriptions of, like, Alzheimer's or something are. Like, it's very minimal, and, I mean, that quote that I read is the most explicit thing. And even that is, like, it's very poetic. The writing...
Yeah.
The writing in this is so good. It's so pretty. Anyway, I will talk about that when we're talking about what we like.
It's poetry and books. So here's one of those things where I want to actually kind of quote the author. It's probably a paraphrase, but essentially, I know he's stated in interviews that this is the strangest book that he's ever written because children read this as an adventure story and adults read this as a horror story. And I think that the implications of the ghost children being trapped there because their souls have been taken, but they are still there. I think that is a major part of what makes this feel like a horror story to adults.
To adults.
Yeah, because even like the other two things that we're going to talk about are, they're honestly, if...
They're more common in other works.
They're more common, but they're also more just like things that, as our podcast is demonstrating, they're things that don't necessarily cross it over into the horror genre, even when they're really awful.
Right.
And they're things that are, I think, more common just in the real world, and not common in the real world, and that makes it fine, but common in the real world, as in like adults just kind of look at it and go, "Oh yeah, that happens." Whereas the theft of your literal self, of who you are, being plucked out. And also Coraline going, "Ooh, hide and seek. All right, let me go find these." Like, I mean, she's not quite that just cavalier about it, but just the idea that her response is, "Oh, okay, so all I have to do is find them, and then it's all fine." That is definitely something that I think is one of those things that shoves this book into horror territory for adults reading it for the first time. But I also think that it's one of those things where it's handled delicately enough and it's handled succinctly enough that it makes sense that it would be something that would pull a child in and make them go, "Oh, this is an adventure. She's rescuing them. This is good. This is cool. This is interesting." Yeah. So, I just thought that was interesting. And also I think it's interesting that the author has had that kind of feedback. Yeah. I mean, it definitely, most of the horror is fridge horror and implications.
Like, it's not gory.
No, not at all.
Like, yeah. Moving on to Coraline, with mind games, doublethink, and gaslighting. Mainly gaslighting.
Yeah. So we should be clear, because we have two worlds here that we're talking about. And we have, conveniently enough, we have two traumas that we're discussing. This particular trauma is located in the other world. The other mother's world.
Yep.
And she wants Coraline to stay with her, and because she's hungry, and Coraline is her food. But, like, I find it really interesting that she does this. She essentially tries to do, like, as little work as possible for herself. So she's trying to convince Coraline to want to be there. Like, there's this there's not even just an implication. It downright shows us that she very well could just, like, wait for her to wander down the tunnel and then just pick her up and drop her in a box and seal the key and then shut the door, and that would be it.
Yeah.
Like, she totally could have just been like, oh, okay, you're my prisoner. I've now trapped Emil. I'm just gonna wait. But there's a lot of spider symbology. There's a lot of, like, explicitly stated, like, webs that she's weaving, both physical and metaphorical. And
saying that she's like a spider, and spiders don't need to build any more of the world than their web.
Yeah, and things like that, where she very much wants Coraline to choose her, to pick her. And her chosen method of doing that is really to just make Coraline, or try and make Coraline feel like that her parents have literally physically abandoned you. And I think that this is kind of, I don't think it's unintentional that she picks that thing. I think that she is choosing the thing that she is trying to convince Coraline of based off of how her parents actually do treat her.
Oh, absolutely. Because, like, if someone's problem at home is that they've got, like, helicopter parents who won't leave them alone, then
hey, look, I'm an escape from this.
do an opposite tactic.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But there's just a lot of instances in this book, and it's not very long, and we still get a lot of different instances where she is essentially saying, hey, this thing that's happening to you, here's how I think you should interpret it, and it's just another reason why you should come stay with me forever. Like, check out, say, look, like, you can't find your parents? Clearly they've just abandoned you. You should stay with me forever. Oh, you like the food here? Like, clearly I just feed you better. You should stay with me forever. Like, that's it. That's the whole end game.
She even makes this, like, weird pantomime thing where she shows through the mirror how it looks in the other world.
Oh,
and
my
it's
gosh.
like Coraline's parents walking in and loudly announcing how awesome it is that they don't have a kid anymore.
Yeah. And then she tells her that mirrors always lie. Like,
oh, yeah. Yeah, tells her that later.
Like, will you just... Okay, well, you told on yourself, but alright.
I hadn't actually thought about those two things in conjunction, because they are far enough apart in the book.
Oh, I 100% read that and went, oh, well... Clearly, I mean, did you mean to tell her that this is what you were doing? Like, but I mean, it's demonstrated that Coraline already knows.
Speaking of, like, gaslighting and contradictions and, like, look, I'll show you this thing in the mirror. Mirrors always lie.
Yeah.
We then have nobody sensible believes in ghosts. That's because they're all liars.
Oh, yeah.
Are they,
oh my gosh.
Do they exist and you can't trust them? Or do they not exist? Like, nobody sensible believes ghosts because they're all liars. That would be a coherent thought. But nobody sensible believes in ghost because they're liars.
Yes.
That's doublethink.
That's doublethink. And also, it is intentionally set up so that she will doubt herself and think of herself as a liar for talking to the ghost children from our first topic.
Also, the moment where she's like, we love the sinner and hate the sin. I'm like, I am so sorry.
You have a particular reaction to that one.
I am so sorry to anyone I ever said that to when I was a Christian. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's so bad. Especially when it's like, if you're, a good child and you're compliant, and then we will understand each other perfectly and we'll love each other perfectly.
Oh, yeah. Like, if you just become the thing that I want, then I'll understand
then we will have no problems.
Yeah, it's so gross.
It's just... because it's like, I love you, I just hate everything about you and all your life decisions, but I love you.
Yeah.
It's really terrible. And it's not even something that he made up. It's a thing people actually say. And again, I'm so sorry. But it's just also like when she's saying that, like, when the other mother is saying that Coraline's parents must have abandoned her and gotten bored or tired. And she's like, I will never be bored. I will never abandon you. Like, in the house are 3 kids to whom she made the same promises and then abandoned.
Yeah, literally
and we've
just
already
ate
met
them up
them.
and then walked away.
Yeah, we've already met them by the time she says this. Like, this is right after.
That is an interesting point. Does she not know where they are? Because
I don't think she's given it another thought.
Oof.
Ouch.
I don't think she's given it enough thought. Like, she's using their souls to power the illusion explicitly.
But once she's gathered their souls, they're just
right.
They're
They just
effectively dead
exist
to her.
to power more of the web to trap more kids. Like, over time, if she had more souls, like, the house would get bigger and bigger
Right.
and more
That's
elaborate
what I
and
was
have more
assuming.
copies, probably.
Yeah.
Again, that's not explicit in the text, but it's
implied, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the mind games. So many mind games. And we've talked about, like, the main points of the mind games.
Yeah.
And I don't really have anything else to add for this section. Like, our last topic is going to be the biggest one with the most to say.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, this is showing a thing that happens a lot. That is, if you just do exactly what I want, we won't have a problem. Like, that kind of language really gets used in the real world all the time.
Yeah.
And it just, like, squishes people. And
Oh, it's awful. Because you hear it and you think, well, if I was... You look at it yourself and you're like, well, if I was just this thing, or if I was better, or if I was something they could bother to care about or understand or love, then we would all be fine. But it's not on you to do that, but it's set up to make you think that it's your fault that they don't treat you very well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's absolutely the setup that is happening here.
Yeah. Because then you're like, if I can just be this other thing that isn't me, then it'll be fine. That can be anything from talking less to talking more to, like, trying to be less queer. Like, it's so many things.
It's so pervasive, and it works for literally anything that anyone wants you to edit about yourself to suit them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And I think having it explicitly contradicted, I think it's really important that the reader doesn't get gaslit during this book.
Oh, yeah.
Because every time you have one of these things where the other mother, other than the very first, look, I'm awesome, I made food, can we put buttons in your eyes?
Right.
Other than that first introduction, which, again, almost immediately has, well, you can have this if we can mutilate you. Other than that very first introduction, every time the other mother lies, we already have the evidence that she's lying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important.
Oh yeah,
for
absolutely.
The reader.
Well, we it's not even just that. We don't only have we have the evidence that she's lying, but also Coraline's inner monologue directly says, "Oh no, that is incorrect. You are lying to me."
Yeah.
And I think that's important too, especially because this is a book for children about children. Well, I guess it's not for children. It's not explicitly only for children, but it's a book about a child, and it's written for children to be able to access. And I think it's a very good demonstration of a concept.
Especially if it's going to be very close to real language that people really use.
Oh yeah, very much so. It's very much a look, see this thing? That's a lie.
And we'll definitely talk about it in the wrap-up. I just wanted to highlight it here.
Yes.
Okay, so actually moving on to the next section now. Alright, so Coraline, dismissal of her desires combined with neglect, both from the parents and from the other parents. So our own guess on the podcast of how old Coraline is we think she's like between 8 and 10. We don't get it explicitly ever in the book, but a lot of the way her parents interact with her has kind of the feeling of she's starting to have autonomy and they haven't noticed.
It's not even just that they haven't noticed. It's that combined with when she tries. Well, I wouldn't even.
They're not taking it seriously. Like,
well, I think it's more than that. I don't think that she's just starting to have autonomy. I think that they have abandoned her for so long that she just has almost forced autonomy.
Yeah, like they totally dismiss her from rooms often without looking at her.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
They're like, oh, you can't go in that nice room. And like, I understand there being like a front room or a parlor where you don't want someone playing in it, but it sounds like she can't even walk through it.
They don't want the furniture getting... They don't want things getting touched. They don't want things getting messed up. They don't want things getting moved or broken or wear and tear appearing on them. Also, like, the furniture in question is from a deceased grandparent, so like it's an heirloom. It probably has sentimental value to want whoever's parent it was.
But she doesn't get all that context. She just gets, you can't be in there.
But I mean, like, but that's not even as bad. Honestly, I wasn't even thinking of that as like a negative thing. That's just, hey, this is the room that we don't touch unless we have company, okay? Okay. And, like, that feels fine to me.
Well, no, I was more thinking of it in the, like, I was more going to bring up, she gets weirdly inconsistent rules because she's not allowed to be in there, but when her dad is trying to get her out of his face, he's like, count the windows, find everything blue, and he says, like, one other thing, and she says, well, what about that room? And he's like, yeah, go in that room. That's fine. Like, it's fine as soon as it's to help get her out of his face. Actually,
I would like to posit a different theory.
Okay, sure.
I think it's the mom that just doesn't want her in there and the dad doesn't care.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
I think it's explicit that her mom says, no, we don't touch that furniture. Actually, I'm going to make a conjecture and say that it's probably the mom's mother who died.
Yeah, maybe. But anyway, in terms of, like, the dynamic of... We explicitly have a dynamic of, like, one very strict parent and one super lax parent.
Yeah.
And they're both ignoring her.
Yeah. The mom is... And the mom, like, there's a weird parallel here where both the mother and the other mother just run right over and dismiss things that Coraline cares about in view of what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Like when her real mother takes her shopping, she asks essentially for like one item that she would like to have. She would like gloves. I think it was gloves.
Yeah, it's gloves.
That are bright and shiny and cool and silly. And her mom basically goes, nah, you don't need those. And like, yeah, but that's true. She doesn't, but that's not the point. And the other mother, it's, I want us to play. You don't want to play? Well, that's not what I want.
Yeah. And with the gloves, I think it's clear from the way it's described that this is like buying everything they need for a school uniform. And so she's like, I want to have some individuality. I don't want to be all like my peers, even though I'm in a uniform. And her mother says basically like, that's a silly thing to want, instead of saying, the dress code says you can't wear the gloves. Do you want to have them to wear at home? Like something that acknowledges why Coraline can't have what she wants for a reason other than I don't want to bother.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about the movie, like just super briefly, you might, if you only watch the movie and then you're coming to the book, you might not get as much of that feeling because the movie makes it look like maybe they're saying no to all this stuff because of money problems. The book doesn't have that characterization. And so we don't, in this text, we don't have any of that context or that extra to say that there's like a real reason for her parents to just dismiss what she wants.
Yeah.
And that doesn't reflect either necessarily positively or negatively on the movie. It's just...
Oh, no.
It's just a
different medium. It's a different medium.
And here, in the book, they don't show it. Like, we don't know what their parents do. We just know they're always busy.
Well, we know that they're busy on the computer.
Well, yeah, her dad's busy on the computer.
That's all we
I
get.
think her mom's busy on the computer. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is we'd kind of had an interesting thing in our notes here, because she specifically doesn't like food that her parents provide, because her mom just makes something frozen and just like heats it up, right? Mm-hmm. And her dad makes quote unquote real meals, according to her.
But it's a real meal where, like, half the pizza's under and half the pizza's over.
Yeah, it's a real meal that he, like, tries from a recipe, and he tries to make it, like, really complicated and fancy. And she explicitly says, essentially, that she doesn't like recipes, but also there's kind of this implied, like Robin was just saying, there's kind of this implied, like, it's not just that she doesn't like it, it's that he just doesn't make it very well, and it's gross, and she doesn't want to eat something that's gross.
Yeah.
But then I found it really interesting that, like, so she's left to kind of, so then when she basically says, like, I don't want to eat that, her parents are like, okay, well, fend for yourself, child. And...
Yeah. And I made the point that she's always able to fend for herself because they've put food for Coraline to eat when she doesn't like what we ate. But Nikki made the counterpoint that why didn't they just make what Coraline wanted to eat? And if she's...
Or, I mean, it's not even why didn't they just make that. My argument.
Sure.
Is that, yeah, sure, little kid, you can forage in your own home is not providing for a child.
Yeah.
That's my argument, is that, yeah. And also, I don't actually think that they explicitly have food for her for when she doesn't want their food. I don't think that's what's happening.
Oh, you think she's just eating stuff?
Oh, no. I think that the food that she is preparing is the food that her mom buys because she would have made it if the dad didn't make dinner.
But she doesn't like it when her mom makes it.
She doesn't like it when her mom makes it because she thinks it's boring, but she will microwave her own frozen pizza.
Interesting. Or whatever it is. It's not explicitly pizza. But
well, there is one where she talks about microwaving a frozen pizza.
About a frozen pizza?
That is actually a food that I remember because I went, ooh, you're supposed to put that in the oven. Okay. I remember thinking that. But I think it is an interesting juxtaposition here where I don't actually think that she's eating food that's different from what her parents are providing. Mm-hmm. I think that she is, I guess, looking for control over it, or looking for, like, well, if I have to fend for myself, at least this is something I chose, kind of.
Yeah.
And
again, the characterization here is thin enough that we get into speculation really fast. Do you want to move on to how she's treated about her name?
Oh my god, yeah. So, this treatment neglect, or is it?
I think it contributes to the broader... Well, adults who literally aren't responsible for her not remembering her name very well, I don't think that is neglect or abuse. I think that...
I'm not saying them forgetting her name is neglect or abuse.
Okay.
I'm saying that when she says, my name is Coraline, and they go, no, it's not, it's Caroline.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's weird. I think it's a combination of old people being like, that's definitely not the words that I heard, Caroline. What are you talking about? Your parents said your name is Caroline. Like,
Oh, that's a horrifying
Well, I don't know if...
Because her parents definitely call her Coraline.
Right. I think that just the old people around her don't think it's a real name and just
I don't think they listen to her.
Oh, yeah.
I don't
they
think
definitely
they
don't
hear
listen
her.
to her.
Well, because the old man heard the rat.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the mouse. Yeah.
No, it's a rat.
No, real world it's mice. Other world it's rats.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
I thought it was rats
the mice called her Coraline, and he's like, it's weird that the mice don't know your name. And she's like...
so clearly he heard them, but then he didn't hear her.
That's a good point, if they can hear it when someone else says it.
Yeah.
It more builds into the bigger picture of her feeling unseen and unheard. In any other book, I wouldn't call it neglect, but it definitely builds to the emotional, it builds into the feeling of this world in a really smart way. Especially since, like, being a kid and not having people take seriously what you want to be called.
Oh,
and
yeah.
if it's anything from, I don't like my nickname, to, I don't like my given name, please use my nickname. Like,
yes.
At minimum, like, that happens a lot. Again, not spending a ton of time on that, just mentioning how it builds into the overall feeling that her identity and her decisions are not taken seriously.
Yeah, and we also, like, we kind of talked about this, well, because we have to when we're putting together our
notes, yeah.
Our own notes. So, when we do this podcast, we always have, we kind of put our minor character first, no matter what, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then with our main character, we go in what we feel is the order of escalation. So, like, the most impact that the trauma has on the character, or the more severe the trauma and the way it's written, it goes second.
Mm-hmm.
We honestly think that what seems like a lifetime pattern of neglect and abandonment and ignoring her as a human being, we think that that is more traumatic to her, and it affects her more than the
gaslighting,
than the villain and the plot of the book of this thing that's happening to her. Like,
and feel free to read the book and then disagree with us.
Oh yeah, no. If you read it or you watch the movie and you do not think that's true, okay, cool. But when we were reading this, we really looked at it and went like, man, the underpinning for why this other trauma happened really is that her parents just don't take care of her.
Yeah,
and as a person, they just kind of buy food and make sure that she has clothes, and then that's it.
Yeah, and they don't interact with her. They don't play with her at all.
And not even just not playing with her. Like, I think that the first half of that sentence is the most accurate. They just don't interact with her.
Yeah. I think it's time to move on within this topic to how she gets neglected in the other world.
Oh, yeah. Whoops.
Now we've got the setup, the baseline for how she was at home.
Yeah. Oh, so, she was... Yeah, go for it.
So, in the other world, the most extreme form of neglect in this book is that she gets locked in a room with no food or water for some indeterminate amount of time, and she gets threatened with being locked up until she's good, which is compliant, which is until she says she will love the other mother. Mm-hmm. And it is that this event is part of why this topic is our second one, but it is, she gets locked in this room with nothing, and she's told that she has to change her personality. Reference our earlier section on gaslighting. She's basically told that she has to lose her personality in order to get out and have freedom.
Yeah.
And then there's this, she gets offered, like, so she's locked in this room with nothing, and then back to back is offered everything that she's told her real parents that she wants as like a bribe to get to stay. And it made her want to leave and be like, no, I didn't want those things because they were those things. I wanted them because I wanted them and I wasn't getting them. And it has like a weird, it's got like a weird message because it seems like she's now fine with how inattentive her parents are because it's better than getting locked in cupboards or locked behind mirrors by the other mother, which it's a weird, potentially squicky message you'd pushed back on when we were talking about the ending of this book. Did you have any specific thoughts here?
Wait, what? Which part did I push back on?
I had started to say that she was now willing to accept their level of inattentiveness because it's better than active abuse.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah, you had lots of thoughts.
I do have lots of thoughts on that. Sorry, I had forgotten which part I had had a thought. Okay, so I don't think she's accepting the real world.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree.
Okay.
I think that she says that as a line to the other mother to throw it in her face and to make her upset enough to act the way that she needs her to act so she can snatch the snow globe.
Okay.
I think it is a direct manipulation on Coraline's part, that is she's kind of feeding back on what she knows the other mother doesn't want because she wants her mad and not paying attention in that moment. And on top of that, she definitely looks at it and says essentially that I think she really does believe that if she just got everything she wanted, that's not fun. That's not helpful. Like, she doesn't want to just be handed the things she asks for, but I don't think that's because she's accepting the neglect in the real world. And I don't think that I think she recognizes a little bit more that her parents are not doing this on purpose. And I think she appreciates that they are trying to do things like her dad trying to cook and come up with cool recipes for his family and give them food and stuff. And she is trying to appreciate them more.
Okay.
But I think that is because the other mother makes it very clear that the other mother wants her to be what she wants. And she goes, oh, good, my parents aren't like that. But I don't think it's because she thinks that it's all fine now.
Yeah. It's like she's trying to reach out to them more.
Right. Like, she's kind of saying, like, okay, well, what they're doing isn't okay. But instead of just demanding that they come to me, I'm going to go to them maybe a little bit and see if it gets better.
Yeah.
And I don't think she's just fine with it. But also I think that she still reads as very young.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is almost maybe a little bit of maturing on her part inadvertently. Where instead of saying, well, you know, we don't have a good relationship or they don't treat me very well, so I'm going to be in their face and demand that they pay attention to me. Instead, she's saying, hey, I'm going to reach out to them and try and be part of what they're doing for me, like dinner time. Hi, Haku. And I don't think, by the way, I'm not condoning that as a method of a reaction to abuse. Like, it is not your job to reach out and make your abuser stop.
Yeah.
But I do think that is I do think it makes sense that is the motivation here. Mm-hmm. I think she's trying to appreciate them as parents more, but also it's not an excuse, and she doesn't say like, oh, it's fine now. She just says that, hey, maybe I don't need everything handed to me. I just want to be legitimately heard and taken care of.
Yeah. And then also, like, at the very end, she uses the fact that they're not paying a lot of attention in order for her to be able to handle the logistics of tricking the hand of the well and making everything actually be resolved.
Well, that is the other thing, too, is that she straight up doesn't even consider going to her parents for help when she has a literal piece of a monster stalking her to try and get back access to her.
Yeah.
It doesn't even occur to her. Her parents were kidnapped and locked away and helped her get out, in theory. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't even ask if they remember it.
Yeah, well, she said that it doesn't seem like they do. They don't appear to have noticed that they're missing 2 days. We do have a line about that, but again, I don't know all of what they said or did to make her come to that conclusion, because it doesn't describe it. Like, it's not important to the plot, and so we don't get that.
Right.
And it works in the story, it just makes it a little bit harder to talk about the book from the angle that we are approaching it.
I would honestly love to have a sit down with this author and just ask him about this book.
Yeah.
But, alright, that's all I had.
Alright, moving on to the wrap-up. On to the wrap-up and ratings. For the first topic, the Ghost Kids, what is our gratuity rating?
I think in the text, it's actually pretty mild.
Yeah.
And off-screen.
Yeah,
or
mild off-screen.
Mild backstory? Yeah.
Yeah. Mild and backstory. Like we said in the specific section, most of the horror is fridge horror, and it's not explicit in the text. And for the gaslighting,
I'm really not quite sure about this one.
Okay. I think I'd say it's moderate.
I would make an argument. So,
is your argument that it's severe?
I want to make an argument for both mild and severe.
Interesting. I like it. Okay.
And then tell me what.
Sure.
And if we have to compromise with moderate, I understand. But so my argument for mild is that the protagonist immediately identifies it, calls it out in her own head, and is not in the text guilted by it or feeling like it is her fault or quote unquote falls for it. Mm-hmm. And I think it is handled in a way where kind of as the author has talked about in interviews, like a smaller child reading this is not going to feel gaslit. And also, they're going to recognize people, they're going to have more of a context for how to recognize people lying to them by telling them things that aren't real are real, or things that are real aren't, in either direction. So in that case, I think it is mild and also a very, very, very good demonstration of calling it out, even if it's in your own head. My argument for severe is that it is pervasive, blatant, in your face, and the adults who read this in context, seeing it more as a horror story, it's going to be reflective of things that are said in the real world in very, very abusive ways. And also, a couple of the lines that we do call out in our segment are pulled directly from their quotes that are used as abusive gaslighting in the real world.
Yeah.
So
how about we go with?
I think it's in conclusion. I think it is mild or severe, depending on your own context and framing in your own life.
I think
and how
I
old
would
you
go
are.
ahead and say that it is severe, but treated with care.
Okay, that is also fair.
So I now know what we're going to say 2 segments down, but I think that's the distinction that you're parsing, because what you're saying is it is blatant and heavy-handed and constant, but not
and super gentle.
but also gentle. And I think that's why we have 2 separate ratings for this.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
All right. Neglect. I think this is actually very severe.
Oh, yeah. Yep, it's so severe that people not doing things is the major trauma in the book. That's how much the neglect is.
Yeah.
Yep, and I think that's all we need to say about that here.
Yep.
All right. For the
why
Ghost Kids. Yeah. They are integral to the plot.
The Ghost Children, specifically.
Yeah, the Ghost Children, and the fact that they are ghost children
is also integral to the plot.
Is also integral to the plot, and that is more of the actual trauma.
The gaslighting is also integral to the plot.
Mm-hmm.
It's the hook.
That's what the whole thing is about. And then the neglect is integral because
there's a reason for her to even...
Yeah, it's what primed her to be vulnerable to the events of the book.
Yeah.
Yep.
Treating with care. Ghost children. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. And done oh so well. A couple of well-placed, beautiful quotes. One of which we quote in the segment. Yeah, just enough so that you understand what's going on, but not so much as it's just well done.
It's very nice.
Yeah. The gaslighting, like I said above, that is treated with care. With
delicate, fine, kid-centered gloves.
Yeah, and
yellow gloves. No, I'm just kidding.
That's a good one. The one thing I do want to go ahead and say here, because I don't consider it to be a spoiler, every time we have the most heavy-handed form of gaslighting, prior to that in the text, we have been given the tools to understand that the person doing the gaslighting is objectively wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So we're given the tools to hang on to reality in a way that protagonists who are being gaslit don't always have. And in this, the protagonist does. And they're able to call it out when it's happening.
Yeah.
Which I think if you're going to have this kind of trauma and have it be that severe is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, to the neglect. I think enough care.
Yeah. I think enough care. I don't know. This one is just. I think you're right. I think it's enough. It's definitely not just handled with care the way the others are, but also I think that there isn't really a way to handle it with pure care, just because it's so pervasive and it's so much of just what informs the story and her responses.
Yeah, it's the skeleton of the book. It's hard to
it's hard to hide it with scaffolding.
Yeah.
And also in juxtaposition to what we just kind of said about the gaslighting, unlike the gaslighting, we don't see Coraline calling it out and working through it.
For the
point of view
for the ghost children, the point of view, we are in the aftermath for them, and we get as much of their perspective as we are able to get because of the nature of their existence. We get to hear their own words for what's going on, and it is some of the most beautiful prose in the book. And yeah, so we get their point of view as much as is possible from a book that is first person and not their point of view.
Yeah.
We get them being listened to.
Yeah.
Yeah. For the gaslighting, we get the perspective of the person being gaslit in their own head saying, that's
hey,
not real.
That's a lie. Yeah. This is false.
Yeah.
You are manipulating me. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And same with the aftermath. We basically just get her.
Yeah.
Neglect. Also just her.
Because it's a first-person book.
Because it's a first-person book, and when you have a first-person point of view of someone not being there, you only get the victim.
Yeah.
That's all. That's all there is.
Yeah. We also do get what she thinks about what's going on.
That's true.
So we get her perspective on why and how things aren't happening.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Moving on to the aspiring writer tip. Do you have one? Or do you just want to gush about how well he made a book that is an adventure story for kids and a horror story for adults?
I mean, probably that one. I think that... but I don't know how to make that a tip.
Yeah.
I have no clue.
I don't know. This is some of the kind of feel of, like, movies for kids that are really good movies for kids are interesting for the adult to watch because you know the kid is going to make them watch it 100 times. This isn't quite like that, but it has that similar thing where there's like two levels happening in the book simultaneously.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is from honestly describing how Coraline sees the world.
Oh, absolutely.
And unflinchingly describing what's happening in that world means that people who understand what those things mean know what's going on. And people who, whether because of age or not having had that experience, don't pick that up. They just get an adventure story, and it's really well written.
Yeah. I guess the tip in that is don't be afraid to build in things that you don't necessarily think that your audience is going to pick up on. Like, don't be afraid to have a reason that's not the thing that you want the character, not the thing that you want the audience to automatically get out of it. Like build your story.
Yeah. And describing what's going on without having it being followed up, but she didn't understand why they were doing that. Because I've read books that do that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's boring, and it's like, look over here, I'm being clever. And this doesn't do that.
No, this doesn't even go anywhere near that.
Yeah. It's good about that in ways similar to how His Dark Materials was good about that. Having those levels. Yep. All right. Moving on to our favorite non-traumatic thing about the book. Do you have yours?
I think you should go first.
Okay, so my favorite non-traumatic thing about the book is the bit where the other mother is tapping her eye, and then the sound turns into water dripping from the sink. To be fair, part of why it's my favorite moment in the book is because, like, I remembered it so vividly that then when I saw the movie and they have that scene, I was just like, this movie is literally the book. It is so great. And I forgot that YB is not in the book.
Yeah.
And saying my favorite thing about this book is the movie feels like a weird thing to say, but that's not quite it. But this is one of those rare books where I would have no qualms about being like, it's okay if you don't read the book, just make sure you see the movie. Or it's okay if you don't read the movie, if you don't see the movie, just make sure you read the book. Like, experience this story some way.
Just pick your favorite medium and just do it.
Just pick your favorite medium and explore this story. I haven't read the graphic novel, so I can't vouch for that. But it's just...
it looked pretty.
Yeah. The imagery in the book is so good that the details that are focused on just are really, really nice. Anyway, I loved that moment with the sink. When I was reading the book. What's yours?
I really like... I just really like that the cat doesn't need a name.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have good communication skills, according to the cat will always know when you want to talk to them. And humans are the only ones who need intentional names because they can't figure out when they're being spoken to. And it's such a funny concept, especially because I am a cat owner. And no, my cats 100% do absolutely need me to call their name. And they do look at me and respond and answer if I talk to them explicitly. And it's just so funny to me because if I'm talking to Princess, Haku is not paying attention, and if I talk to Haku, Princess will ignore me, but not the other way around. Like, they don't ignore their own name, and it's just very amusing. And just like Robin always picks the horse, I promise I'm not always going to pick the cat. I just thought that one line was very, very entertaining.
I don't always pick the horse for my favorite thing.
That's because there isn't always a horse.
Regardless. All right. I think that's it. Thank you so much for listening. Read the book, see the movie, do something.
We're just hardcore recommending this story.
Just Neil Gaiman is great. Coraline is great. Experience
Good
this
Omens
somehow.
is great.
Good Omens is great. It just, again, book and movie. We'll probably talk about that one someday. Just not today. We've got too much on our queue, but please experience this story. It's really, really good. This is one of the books that we had in mind from the start of doing this podcast. It was like, well, we know we've got to read Garth Nix, we've got to read Philip Pullman, and we've got to read Coraline.
Yeah.
Just was like, this is why. Getting to talk about stuff like this is why we made this podcast, and we're really excited to share it with you. Just please read Coraline or something. All right. We'll see you in a fortnight. Thank you so much for joining us.
All music used in this podcast was created by me as HeartBeatArt Co. and is used with permission.
You can follow us on Twitter at BooksThatBurn, all one word.
Email us with questions, comments, or book recommendations at booksthatburn@yahoo.com.
Support us on patreon.com/booksthatburn. All patrons get access to our upcoming book list and receive a one-time shout-out.
Leave us an iTunes review. This really helps people to find the show.
And find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks.